Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to Brains and Baubles Live. I'm your host, Davina Dandridge. I am an emotional empowerment coach. I'm an author and I'm a professor. And I just want to thank you for joining me today because each week we meet here, right here on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook Live, and even LinkedIn to talk about emotional intelligence. And each week I bring on an interesting guest that's applying emotional intelligence in their lives. And you can learn from them and you can apply some of the things that we talk about to your life. And I mean, sometimes you may have heard about these things and just haven't quite understood why you should start using some of these tips or techniques with the things that you're doing in your life. But I'm here to tell you there's value in learning something new and being open. And that's what emotional intelligence does. It allows you to think critically, have an open mind, and be daring. Get outside of that square and do something different from yourself. Well, each week, like I said, I bring on a new guest, and these guests have something special. And my guest tonight is no different, except for, well, maybe three different things. She's my childhood friend. She introduced me to the love of my life. She's now my niece, and she's the host of Vintage Girl Chat. So without further ado, here's my childhood friend, Ramona Dandridge. Come on in, Ramona. What you got? What you got? What you got? Is she on? Is she on? She's connecting. Oh, I'm just really excited about this. Come on. I've been on her show. This is her first time on mine. So let's see how she comes with it. Uh-oh, let's see here. Well, anyway, I'll keep talking about her. We met at school when we were 12, 11 or 12 years old. It's that impressionable age where you are just now into boys or into girls if you're a boy, and you are learning about navigating the seas of friendship, and sometimes friendship is sometimes not so friendly friendship. I see that your sound is off, Moni. Is your hey? There she is. You got to unmute yourself. You're still muted. Okay.
I'm old and I'm trying to be cool. And
You're
there we
cool.
go.
You're
Can you hear
cool.
me now?
I was
Thank you for
just telling the
inviting me.
people about when we met and what we were going through when we met. It was that awkward
Okay.
stage in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And
So awkward.
what did you say?
I said so awkward.
So awkward, so awkward. But Ramona and I had a lot in common instantly. I don't even remember our first conversations or anything or what we bonded over. But it was like, I was like, there was no Ramona. I remember asking a classmate of ours who went to church with you, like, we're getting a new. So, but let me just explain. Our school was so small that our eighth grade classroom was shared with a seventh grade classroom. And it was only 13 of us that graduated from that eighth grade. So we were the top of the tier in the school, but it was only 13 of us. Well, anyway, I asked the guy, I said, oh, you know, the new girl that's coming to class, her name is Ramona. He was like, yeah, I know Ramona. I said, what she's like? Like, Ramona is Ramona.
And I've stuck to that all of my life. Thank you ever so.
And you know what? That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, is because so many people, and I know you have done this since we were children, all throughout that teenage, young adult, and even in womanhood, been yourself, individual, where if, you know, somebody mentions you and they know you are distinctive. And it's not, I know you very well. I mean, very, very well. And it's not an act, it's not a put on, it's genuinely you. And you've been your authentic self and your unique self without restrictions. And I appreciate about you. And even when we weren't in school together, we still gravitated toward the same things. I mean, we were debutantes together and we modeled together as we were learning how to get into things. We had businesses together. I mean, goodness, now that I think about it, we've been around each other very much a long time. That whole, and dancing. Oh, how we love to dance. That's another show.
Yeah,
We're not gonna do that right
that's
here.
another show. That's another show. We're not going to
Try to
talk
be
about that right now.
professional. Well,
Okay, right,
listen,
right.
Ramona,
Thanks.
I've already said a number of things in your introduction. I said that you're my childhood friend, that you introduced me to the love of my life, that
Which
you're
is,
my niece,
well, hilarious. I didn't even
that
see.
you're my
I mean, I
niece,
didn't see that coming, but go ahead.
and that we've been good friends. I also said that you're the host of the ever popular Vintage Girl Chat, and that you have a voice, a great voice for the vintage world, to bring diversity and inclusion in the vintage world. And I just want you to just start with your idea that you can express yourself however you felt necessary. What gave you, even as a young girl, the confidence to do something like that?
So I have always done, like you said, stuff my way. Like growing up, my mother was very much into classical music. She was into jazz. So being an young African American kid, I really liked classical music. My grandmother was an opera singer. My dad's mother was an opera singer. So I was introduced to that. Listening to like 80s music, I like the British music more or less, like
Yeah.
Wham, Duran Duran, Pet Shop Boys, that sort of thing, what people called white music.
Yes.
So I kind of just have done what I wanted to do and gave no fucks about what anybody thought.
I mean, you
And
can't.
yeah, you can. I mean, because if you start living your life caring what other people say, then you're not going to do anything. Like I cut my hair short when
Yeah.
everybody else was trying to have super long hair short. Like I pretty much have done what I wanted to do pertaining to my appearance. Didn't care what anybody thought, and if it made me happy and I felt confident when I walked out the door, then I'm
But
fine.
that's
I
the
don't
only
care
way
if you don't
you're
like it.
going to be confident, if you are. I mean, everybody says, well, it's about what's in the inside. No, the outside matters, because we are looking to be accepted in some way, shape, or form by the people that we're around. And part of
Mm-hmm.
that has to do with appearance. And I know, even besides being an Instagram personality, or, some of the other things that you've done, or some of the things that I've done, even on a regular day, the pride you have in your appearance and feeling free and confident comes from you expressing yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
I just feel sad for people who aren't free enough to say, hey, I really don't like this trend, but everybody else is doing it, so I guess I better go join in, or I'm not going to fit in at the club, or at the office, or at the country club, whatever it is. I know that you had a store, and your store was more than just a place to go buy fine vintage wear. You actually counseled people in your store. And I've even met people that would come to your store just to feel the vibe and feel free. And, tell me what that was like, just realizing that, your love for a free expression through clothing, and your love for vintage clothing brought you to a place where you could become so much more to people than just a place to shop. What did that feel like?
It was great. My love of vintage started a long time ago, before it was cool to wear vintage. Like if you wore vintage, people thought you were poor. I was
Mm-hmm.
not. I just liked the structure of vintage clothing. My grandmother introduced me to vintage, and the clothing that she had, the coats that she had that were very well made, her vintage jewelry that she had. I've just always had a love for vintage. So when I had the opportunity to be a part of opening up a vintage store, I was like, all for it, because I just love
Absolutely.
it. And I first, when we opened the store, I was like, well, I want it to be shabby chic, like everybody else's vibe. But then I was like, you know what? No, I'm in Detroit. I love techno. Let's have techno blasting when people come through the store. the
Absolutely.
floor the floor in the store was not the best, so I ended up like painting vintage on it and different
Very
things on the
creative, by the
store.
way.
Thank you. Everybody else had just like plain walls and these racks that were, everybody, the look of a lot of vintage stores were basically the same. And I wanted to do something different.
You definitely
I,
could feel the vibes.
yeah, yeah. And it
Mhm.
was great because people that came in and shopped were true vintage lovers. They were people who knew what kind of vintage they wanted, the era they liked, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. And being able to talk to people when I had the brick and mortar was a great thing. And some of those people turned into great friends, and I'm still
Oh,
friends
yeah.
with them now,
Mhm.
even though I've closed the brick and mortar.
Good, good. I mean, when you think about art and culture and connection, um, people, especially in Detroit, I'm from Detroit, so I can say this, is still very segregated as far as ideas and where people live, where they congregate, where they shop,
Mm-hmm.
it's very much segregated. And so what culture is just a way that a certain community does things and there's a meaning behind it. But I believe that that can be shared. And I think a lot of times people limit what is shareable because they don't understand it. But the whole part of learning is to have an open mind for something new. And what I liked about your brick and mortar store, and then I want to talk
You
about
modeled for me as well. Y'all didn't know she modeled for my store as well. Go
I
ahead.
did. I did. Listen, we shopped vintage together very far
Mm-hmm.
back, like before vintage was popular. We always shopped together. We modeled in the mall together. That's just like our vibe. Our thing was shopping and eating at Olga's Kitchen. That was our jam. That was it. If we could do that on a weekend and listen to Menudo, we were good. But but the whole idea of inclusion, because you had so many different people, and where your store was located isn't the traditional place where you would get people who would vintage shop. And in one way it could have been looked at as gentrification, but I like to think of it as progression, because if nothing is done, then nothing is done. But if somebody's doing something, there should be a communication about it so that it can be done fairly. But to get back to the point that I was making, which is the true point, is that there were so many different types of people from different backgrounds, from different experiences, that really would come and vibe in your store. It wasn't just like, I'm going to shop and run. People spent time there. You had tea parties, and that even translated over until what I think it evolved into, the vintage girl chat, which I think is just reaching more people with some of that same inclusion story there, and the ability to make normalize vintage as a part of the fashion lexicon that should be recognized. And
Mm-hmm.
so was that an aim of Vintage Girl Chat when you started it? Like, why did you say, okay, well, the brick and mortar, I've transitioned to that. I've had success online. Now I want to share more information with the people.
Well, what basically happened is when I got back into wearing vintage, I Googled it like you do everything that you're interested in. And a
Mhm.
lot of photos that came up were Caucasian women wearing the pinup style. And I
Mhm.
was like, well, that can't be all there is to vintage, because I know people that wear 1980 styles, people that wear 1960 styles. So once I started selling online, I spent more time online and I started to see what people were wearing, what people consider vintage. And then I started to see like interviews like Vogue and Elle and other magazines did. And a lot of those people targeted Caucasian women in the vintage community. I was like, that's bullshit. It's
Uh-huh.
Black people that love vintage. It's Latin people that love vintage. It's
Mhm.
Asian people that love vintage. What can I do to make a difference in the community? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a show where I talk to people in the world of vintage about their favorite vintage items, and I'm going to include everyone. And
Mhm.
so that's pretty much what has happened. And when I just had that idea at the beginning of 2020, I had no idea it was going to take off and be this wonderful thing in the vintage community. I'm pretty honored to say that I've spoken to a large array and a diverse group of men and women when
Mm.
it comes to their love of vintage. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the people that you interview are definitely unique in their own right. And some of the people I've begun to follow, because I'm like, oh wow, look at that. That's a unique idea. And I think it's so easy for people to get stuck in one
Mm-hmm.
thing. And like having a brick and mortar and transitioning from that or evolving in different ways. Some people call it pivoting, and other people term it different ways. But I have attempted things, and for whatever reason, it didn't get to the level of success that I've wanted. But the thing that I've already always thought about was, okay, I learned a lesson from here. How can I apply this lesson and move forward? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that idea or the support to help them move forward, so they get stuck
Mm-hmm.
once they did not do what they intended on doing, and then they lose faith in their dream, or they lose faith in what it is they have to do. So I have done some strange things sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
when you have to change. I have to put down pride and stop thinking like I'm too good to do this, but I still need to eat and pay a car payment and all this while I'm working on my dreams. Can you speak to people about not having a dream deferred, but recognizing when it's time to stay with the same thing that you love, because it's nothing as great as doing something you have passion about, and then discovering, not being afraid to really keep pushing forward with something new that would make you happy as well. I mean, my focus is really just to help uh, give an example of how life is still going to happen to everyone, but we have to determine within ourselves to keep going. Do you feel that same way?
So when I had the brick and mortar, I had to walk away from the store because of tragic circumstance. My dad died, who was one of my business partners, and so I started doing everything online. And when I was doing it on the from online, I had to start from the ground up. But when I started the brick and mortar with my dad and my other business partner, I said, if I ever get to a point where selling vintage does not bring me passion, I'm
Mhm.
going to stop. And so February of 2020, I was, because normally when people come to me to let me know that they have items, sometimes I shop for items. Sometimes people reach out to me. They're like, my grandmother died. She's got a ton
Okay.
of hats. Do you want them? She's got a ton of dresses from the 1920s. Do you want them?
Wow.
And I would say, yeah. So let me go take a look. Somebody reached out to me and was like, my aunt died. I have a house full. She had a house full of gloves and hats and da 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 da. Do you want to come look through it? And I was like, yeah. But after I got off the phone with them, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Uh,
And that scared me because vintage
mhm.
is my, and then I just was like, okay, well, let me sit with that. So I went and I looked at, the items that they had or whatever. And I got some items and I started, doing what I did, taking photos, pricing items. And I just was like, I really don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, that's the second time I said that. So
Mhm.
let me sit back for a couple of weeks and find out what's going on. And what I decided was, because my store was doing really well at that time online, it was really,
Okay.
really good. I was mentioning a few magazine articles and that sort of thing. So I was
Okay.
doing good. What I discovered was I was happier talking to people about their favorite vintage than I was trying to sling it. So
Yeah.
I told myself, I'm going to give myself a month. And if I still have that feeling, I need to set a date to walk away from the store. But in that whole process, I was starting to do more interviews for Vintage Girl Chat. So when I made the change from Vintage Girl Chat, where I talk to people all the time about vintage, as opposed to selling vintage, it
Yeah.
was so seamless
Yeah.
that people were like, oh, I just noticed you stopped selling vintage. I was
Yeah.
like, I haven't sold vintage for like 3 months. And
Well,
they were like, oh my God.
listen, let me just on that note, and then I want to get back to just being self-aware and recognizing when it's time to leave something alone or time to move. And you can tell yourself, but I want to get back to that.
Mm-hmm.
I Goodness, I just lost my thought. Anyway, we're gonna go back to because I was trying to make sure I didn't
Boom.
forget the other thing. But being
Self-aware. You said something about self-aware. Yes.
but you said something else that it'll come back to me.
Okay.
So many times we stay in something because we don't want to lose face. We don't want people to say, oh, you couldn't do it, or you just didn't have the gusto to keep on going. But who knows you better than anyone else? Yourself. You got to listen to yourself. And the only way to be sure that you are really hearing from yourself, and hear me, audience, the only way to be sure that you are truly hearing from yourself is to spend time with yourself on a regular basis. That means prayer, meditation, contemplation. Just have some peaceful time to really introspect. And thank you for that. But yeah, that's the only way that you knew that this wasn't for me anymore. And it's
And
time
God will
to.
show you. God will be like, okay, you asked for it.
Mhm.
So let me put this in your path. And
Yeah.
you have to be conscious and connected, because
Yeah.
if you're not conscious and connected, when he's showing you the path and you're like, oh, that's not it. But it is it. You know
It
what I mean?
is
You
it.
have to pay attention to it. So yeah, so I sat, like I said, I just sat back with it and I just realized my passion was still vintage, but it was
Yeah.
doing vintage in a different way.
Yeah.
And I had a guest on Vintage Girl Chat a couple of weeks ago. Store, stupid people, has an online show.
Hmm.
And she was just like, I would just like to thank you because you were an inspiration and you were one of the first people that were doing what you did as far as like having a
Wow.
regular Instagram show. And you inspired me. And I just want to thank you. And so, me just doing what I was doing because I love to do it brought joy to other people and inspired somebody else to do their own thing. So
Yeah.
that is another blessing when you start doing something that is your path and what God
Yes.
has called you to do. So,
Yeah. And then, we have to do things and realize that when we live within our passion, we're doing things for more than just ourselves. It
mm-hmm,
does impact other people, and it might not be directly, even like the person that you said indirectly. I mean, you've impacted me to do a video show. I've been on your show a number of times. And then for me to truly, because I'm taking off the professor hat. You kind of helped me to get off the professor hat a little bit. And I've done
mm-hmm,
corporate for so long, it was like, whoo, I had to peel a layer of skin off because
mm-hmm,
I was conditioned in that way. And so for me to really start pulling back the onion, I had to, come outside of myself, and definitely doing um, the Brains and Baubles Live is a way of me coming outside of myself and really pressing myself to share more of myself so that I can be a blessing to somebody else in some way, shape, or form. If only
mm-hmm,
one person is watching us today, I'm happy for that, because they have heard your story and how emotional intelligence and self-awareness and just being flexible in your ideas are all beneficial to your emotional health. Because it's nothing worse than keep trying something over and over again and not getting success. That's how people get
mm-hmm,
stuck.
mm-hmm,
And tell me if this isn't true. There's a thin line between um, staying in something and getting stuck, and then just giving up on things automatically. There's a difference between the two.
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There is. If you stay in something and just keep doing it, you're getting up and it's draining from your soul and
Mm-hmm.
it's making you unhappy, you're stuck.
Yeah.
But if you are like on that line, like you said, like there's still a bit of a curiosity where you're like, I wonder if
Mm-hmm.
then that's a sign that you might need to make a pivot moment, which is kind of where I'm in my life right now. You kind of need to make a pivot moment and try something else. But again, like you said, if you listen to yourself,
Yeah.
then I don't think I've ever gone wrong if I've when I listen to my inner voice.
Yeah.
Maybe
We
on
just
some
have to
men
not
I've
talk
dated
ourselves
a
out.
few times, but not on like other stuff. Maybe on men I've dated a few times, but not on other stuff.
But I mean,
But you
but that's
have
what
to
I'm
listen to
saying.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to talk yourself out of
Out
what
of
you're
it. Right.
hearing, but if you
Mm-hmm.
are self-aware, then you can trust your gut. That self-gut check applies to your activities, your dream, and your plans as well. I talk about, if you are weighing your options, then you're looking at how it makes you feel, as well as, if you can do something by a certain date, because you're the one that has to do it. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to add something to your life for the sake of saying that you have a vintage store, you have something else, and it's really making you feel like you want to just get into bed and crawl under the bed every day. You don't feel the love and the joy that you should for it. then it's time to go ahead and move on. So listen, I know that Vintage Girl Chat is just growing, growing, growing. But what is next? What are you planning? What do you want to share that because this is not the end. You're one of my elite VIPs, so I already know the answer to these questions, and I know that you already have the plan to do it. I just want you to share how people can dream bigger than they may think they can.
I have a post-it note because my daddy used to tell me if there's something you want to do, put it on a post-it note and put it on the mirror.
Yeah.
I have a post-it note that says, God can outdream you.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever I'm thinking about doing, I'm sure once I get into that situation, he's going to make it bigger.
Yeah.
So I am going through a thing where I'm trying to put together events for people who like to vintage shop, but have it be exclusive events, as
Ooh.
well as I am noticing a lot of women in their 50s are pivoting to doing stuff that they love. So I
Yes.
want to include that in my Vintage Girl Chat as well,
Okay.
because I'm a lot of people that follow me, like I said, they're vintage lovers. They know what they like, they know what they don't like. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them are 50 and over who are not retiring, but they have disposable income. And they're
Yes.
like, you know what? This is what I want to do now. I'm going to keep my regular job for now, but then I'm going to do this. And they're transitioning from what we were told we were supposed to, because you're supposed to have a job because you got to get that insurance, you got to have that
Yep.
401k.
That's the
But
trap.
that's the trap. That is the trap. I've
Trap.
fallen for it. I'm falling for it. I've fallen for it too. So, but they're making these bold transitions where they're like, you know what? I want to talk to people about beauty. And they've gotten contracts with like beauty companies or whatever. Or I want to talk to people about, I want to make my own handbags. Or they're starting to make handbags and selling them on Amazon or Etsy or whatever.
Wow. Yeah.
So I feel like that is a group of women that you don't hear about a lot on television, because when they talk about Instagram influencers, they talk about 2020,
Booty
teens, people in
models.
their 20s, right? And booty models. But what about grown ass women who are having a journey, another journey in their life where they're pivoting from being somebody who went to school for a particular thing and now they're like, you know what, this ain't it. Let me go
Yeah.
over here and find my joy. So I want to talk about that too.
Absolutely. I think that there is such a need for seeing that visual. And that's why I started my blog a couple of years ago. It was Brains and Baubles. And I really wanted to illustrate how, as women, especially like you said, women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who have had responsibilities but had to make transition from having young children to maybe having children in college, or been through marriage or divorced or not married, or have children and don't have. Every woman and every person I know, but I'm speaking from a woman's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
has the ability to still have their responsibilities, but they should, and I say should because this is an idea that has to be developed in someone, also understand that they can do the things that they want to do. You can really live your best life. And, we have to harness our emotions in order for us to get unstuck, to
Mm-hmm.
know our worth,
Mm-hmm.
right? And not necessarily in a women's lib type of way, but our worth, that we have the ability to set up boundaries with our family to protect our emotions and to allow us to do things, and where some other family members may have to step in and take a more pivotal role. But what I'm saying is this whole idea that somehow once you get past a certain age, you don't do anything new, that you are retiring. Well, just like the world and society is new and different for young people, where college isn't the necessary go to, it's the same
Mm-hmm.
for older people too, even more so. Because I know I don't feel like the 50-ish people that I used to see when I was in my 20s and 30s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just feel like the whole idea that if the world is your oyster, and that we see it and see evidence through people like Vintage Girl Chat, or through you in Vintage Girl Chat, and some other people online who have shows who are showing that, hey, I wanted to travel the world and now I am a solo traveler, and I'm enjoying life. And you see, these people are in beautiful, fantastic, exotic places. And traditionally, you would think that no one would go to Egypt and be riding on a camel by themselves, right? They would have to have a whole entourage or at least a husband to go with them. And I'm not trying to get into the whole thing like that, but I'm just saying the whole idea of what society had placed on people in that age group is different. Is
Way
different.
different. Yeah. Because we have the experience now and we
Yeah.
know, you know what? Okay, so I tried that, it didn't work. I tried that, it didn't work. Ooh, over here, I've always to try that. Let me try that. Ooh, that didn't work out. Well, you know what? My joy has always been this. Well, let me try that. Ooh, well, this is really good. This is successful. I'm doing it my way. And I found that when you do stuff your way and you do something that brings you joy, there's nothing like laying your head down at the end of a day because you have done something you love, you have achieved something and been successful at something, whatever your idea of success is. I'm not talking about the world,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
your idea of success is, then putting your head down at night and being like, I did that.
Oh,
That
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 satisfaction. Oh
that is
my gosh.
satisfaction. That is there's nothing like it. So
That, you know what? You hit it right on the head. You have to have the passion and you have to have the determination no matter what to live that passion, and anybody can do it, whatever the passion is. Ramona, this was awesome. I didn't know where we would be going and how we would be doing this today, but I think the idea of illustrating how you have to live your passion to reach other people and you can do it unabashedly. I think that's a great lesson for people to learn. So tell people where they can see you, and join in with the Vintage Girl crowd.
So Vintage Girl Chat is an Instagram weekly show that I do every Wednesday at 6 p.m., where I talk to people in the world of vintage about their favorite vintage items. It is on Instagram Live. After I do it, I also post it so you can go to Vintage Girl Chat on Instagram and you can watch past episodes. I also want to thank you for living your authentic self, for helping women and men, people
Yeah.
to find their paths in life, to help us focus. And your workshops are freaking amazing. If you've never taken a workshop of hers, you really need to take it
Thank
because
you.
it is amazing. It lit a fire under my ass, and she is just phenomenal. So that's all I
Thank
want to say.
you. Thank you, Ramona. Well, listen, join us, me rather, here next week at 6 p.m. for Brains and Baubles Live, where I will bring on another great guest and we'll talk about emotional intelligence. And if you want to learn more about me and ways that you can connect with me or get my book, you can also go to my website, www.davinadandridge.com. Until next week, bye bye. Bye, Ramona.
Bye, girl.